Hello, good morning. My name is Adam Howell, and welcome to the physed Summit. Thank you so much for joining this global event. We could not make this day happen without you. We're very humbled by the support of the summit from each of you and the phys ed community. By sharing what you'll learn with one person, you are able to impact hundreds of students. Thank you so much for being here to push best practices, effective health and physical education, professional development forward. Reminder that if for some reason the video feed stops, please check out the Tozzle for the new video link. It may take us a few minutes to get it started and rolling again. We thank you for your patience. I will also be your moderator on Tozzle for the back channel during our presentation today. Reminder about the badge system. And we have badges this year that you can, digital badges you can get for watching the phys ed Summit, including a badge for someone who watches all our sessions today. I will post the link to our badge post in the Tozzle. And speaking of Tozzle, chatting on Tozzle is a great and very effective way to learn more. But please feel free to share the great info you are learning on social media using the hashtag PhysEdSummit as well, so all educators can see it. At the end of this presentation, we are trying something new for reflection. Please visit the Flipgrid link on Tozzle that is posted. I will post it in the chat as well. And share up to 90 seconds of how you could use this information in your own classes. If you post a Flipgrid, you will be entered to win one of 2 subscriptions to the premium version for 1 full calendar year. After the summit, we will post the feedback survey to the Phys Ed Summit homepage. We hope that you will provide us with some feedback so that we can make next year even better. In order to receive your PD certificate, you will need to fill out the quick survey after the summit. With all that said, I now want to introduce our presenter today, and Glenn Young from BC, Canada is going to be our presenter. He is a Phys Ed Summit veteran, having presented in the past, and his presentation today is on FMS Assessment Simplified. So Glenn, I am going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for checking in today and taking time out of your busy weekend schedule. Really is a testament to your dedication. So I'm just going to get this set up here. And how's that?
Looks great, Glenn.
So greetings from the west coast of Canada. Thanks again to the Physedagogy crew for organizing such a great event. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you. At this time, could you just share where you're located and what grades you teach through the Tozzle back channel? And as you're doing that, I'm just going to do a little introduction of myself. I spent my last 20 years as the Surrey School District Phys Ed and Athletics Coordinator or Consultant. It's a board non-enrolling position, and Surrey is the largest school district in BC. We have about 125 schools, 72,000 kids, and about 9,000 to 10,000 teachers. So I had a chance to drive the phys ed bus, so to speak, for that school district. And prior to that, I was a teacher for 15 years as a department head and an athletic director. And I've also been busy working as a sessional instructor at our post-secondary institutions, so at UBC, Simon Fraser University, and Douglas College. I did that for 15 years working with the pre-service teachers. I've also been involved with our Ministry of Education in our elementary curriculum revision, and that was through 2003, 2006. And then I've sat on national advisory committees for quality physical education, and I'm currently on a bunch of advisory committees on physical literacy. So, what are we looking at today? I would like, by the end of the session, these are the learning intentions, that you'll be able to identify the need to simplify fundamental movement skill assessment. You'll understand the concept attainment strategy, and you'll be able to implement the yes-no assessments. So that being said, let's head into this. But just before we do, there's 3 constructs that I want to try to put some clarification on. And one is physical activity. So physical activity is really simply just about doing. There's not a lot of concern around quality of movement and learning intentions. Physical education involves teaching and learning, a ministry or state prescribed curriculum. And then physical literacy is a disposition, and it describes a capability to act in a particular way. It's really the most important outcome of quality phys ed program. And I'm trying to, these aren't meant as definitions. I'm just trying to clarify these constructs so you have a framework of where I'm coming from. Physical literacy and phys ed, there's been a lot of discourse around academically and professionally. And so I'm just trying to put a little bit of clarification on this. So if you think of the parallel with literacy, we don't teach literacy. We teach English or language arts, and literacy is developed, or it's the outcome of a quality language arts program. And so the parallel is the same with physical literacy. We don't teach physical literacy. It's the outcome of quality phys ed programming. Current challenges. Let's take stock for a moment of some of the practical and logistical challenges that are facing us. When will what we know change what we do? I really love this question. It's a really essential question. And Dr. David Kirk from the University of Bedfordshire really nailed it. And he talks about how practice of phys ed is really focused on the transmission of decontextualized sport techniques to large classes of children who possess a range of interests and abilities where learning rarely moves beyond introductory levels. And you probably see that whether you're a grade 5 teacher or a 7th grade teacher or a high school teacher. If you're looking at volleyball, the first thing that you're teaching in grade 4 or 5 is, maybe a volley, a forearm pass, and a serve, and that's what you're doing in high school as well. So we don't get past those introductory levels. So why is that? Suzanne Lundvall from the Swedish School of Sport and Health Services said this: assessment and evaluation has been a device for quantitatively measuring isolated skills without any context. If we talk about communicating student learning, and this is where our province has gone, has moved quite a bit away from reporting student achievement. So communicating student learning sort of embodies a two-way communication between not only the teacher and the student, but the teacher and the parents. So it's a two-way street around learning. Have you had parents asking you any of these types of questions? Is my child acquired in hopping? Is my child meeting expectations in stretching? Is my child competent in galloping? My child satisfactory in leaping? How much info is necessary? How much is enough? How much do we need to know? What about the return on investment on skill assessment and skill evaluation? It takes a lot of time. What's your capacity to remediate? So I'm going to pose a question here for you, and I'd like you to share your thoughts again through Tozzle. What are you currently communicating about student learning in PE? And as you're doing that, I'm going to show you 3 things here that we should be looking at. Achievement is generally what we are tending to report on and communicate. Achievement is a measure of a student's current level of performance. We talk about trying to be able to communicate progress or communicate growth, but the majority of it seems to be achievement. If we're really talking about true student learning and physical literacy being an individual journey, and also accepting the fact that all children, all learners learn at different rates, it's really a challenge in our current system to just report on achievement. We've got to somehow be able to communicate learning around growth. And so growth is the increase in learning that has occurred from the beginning of the instructional process to the current reporting event. So think of if your school year, some of you, your school year has already started, and the first reporting session really should be around growth. So let me just take you with another example. If you are working with a trainer or a coach, or you're going through some lessons, after your first couple lessons, you're always, so have I improved? How am I doing? What you're trying to find out is, I came in at a starting point as a beginner, or and I'm trying to learn a skill, and I've had a couple lessons, couple weeks with you now. How am I doing? How much have I improved? What's my growth? That's really what we're trying to find, and we want to communicate. And that's going to be a key piece. And I'll talk about that more as we go along. Other current practical challenges. Our current phys ed model is really focused on sports, and especially around performance, rather than around health. And I don't mean health in terms of health education. I mean health in terms of the skills essential to daily living. Our current paradigm is around exposure. So we expose kids to lots of fundamental movement skills, or lots of skills and activities, and we aren't really looking at proficiency. And we have this assumption that fundamental movement skills develop naturally, but they don't. We actually have to teach them, all of them. We don't have a common set of fundamental movement skills. If I ask you to define, okay, what's the key fundamental movement skills, everyone would have a different, there'd be a few commonalities, but there'd be a lot of differences as well. So we don't really have a common set of fundamental movement skills. And inherent in that is, so then which ones are being taught, and when are they being taught, and what sequence? Assessing and evaluating fundamental movement skills is a very labor-intensive process. You're having to pull out individually and watch kids and do that. And so, what's happening with the rest of the class, because as you're investing in these 1 or 2 kids at a time, or 4 kids, however you're doing that, the opportunity cost is the loss of instructional time for the whole class. So what else could you be doing with the kids if you weren't focused on just those 4 students or 5 students or however many? When we do assess and evaluate the kids and they aren't at a proficient level or meeting expectations, or whatever the heading that you use, the kids aren't able to do the skill, how do we remediate? How do we support those students when they are evaluated? And then really the ultimate question here is, why are we doing this? Is it really benefiting the student, or is it benefiting us? Because we have to load marks and we've got to be able to report on this student achievement. I'm going to quickly do a little brain break with you. So I'm going to have you do something called alphabet balance. If you're in a spot that you're able to do this, I'm just going to have you balance on one leg. And with that leg in the air, I just simply want you to use your toe and spell your name. And just use your toe and just print. You can do that in capital letters. You print your first name. And as you're doing this, I'd like you to be aware of, did your posture change? Were you moving your upper body to adjust, to stabilize? Or were you simply just able to maintain your posture and then just do that action? If we wanted to make this a little more dynamic, I'd add a little hop to land, and then you could add rotation into this as well. And then to make it more challenging, close your eyes and land. And what I'm looking for, what you would be looking for is, if it's just a static balance, stability within the supporting leg, and then if it's more dynamic, then having some sort of looking at stability on the landing within the core and the supporting leg. All right, change. How do we change? I'm sure we've heard this or seen this a lot. We've always done it this way. So how do we think different? These people did it. People don't resist change, they resist being changed. So how are we going to change? If we think of phys ed, our goal in phys ed should be to get every student to that, I'll call it the physical literacy start line, to begin their own journey. So think of race preparation. All the hard work that you're going into run a race, or whether you're training for a 10K, 5K, half marathon, marathon, tri, whatever, all your preparation to get ready to that start line is critical. And so that's the same in phys ed. We should be getting those kids prepped for that physical literacy start line so that they can begin their own journey. And that's what that's a piece that the fundamental movement skills can play. If we can simplify the process, all we need to do with fundamental movement skills is look at yes, no. 2 critical questions. Can they do it? Yes or no. Does it look right? Yes or no. That's all we have to look at. We don't have to worry about quality of performance in phys ed. I think in the sport world, they can look at quality of performance because they're going to have smaller numbers of kids. The population, the size of the classes that we have, we can't focus on quality of performance. We need to develop a common set of fundamental movement skills. If you do a Google search on fundamental movement skills, and you'll see different associations, different organizations, even different sports have their own subsets of fundamental movement skills. They're called fundamental movement skills because they're fundamental to movement, period. So we also need a common sequence for the teaching of fundamental movement skills. And I'm going to go through that as we go through this session. All right, so what exactly are the fundamental movement skills? They are in 3 categories. They used to be called non-locomotor, now they're called stabilizing. There's locomotor or traveling, and then there's manipulative or object manipulation. They are basic patterns of movements that are essential to daily living. And I think that message has been lost because if you look, when you do Google fundamental movement skills, everything that you see that will come up will be related to sport. And fundamental movement skills is more than sport. And that's the message that I'm trying to get across here. They form the foundation for more complex movement activities for recreation and sport. Again, the misconception that through maturation they are developed, and that's not true. And this is based on all of the work from Dr. David Gallahue from the School of Public Health in Indiana University, Bloomington. When you Google fundamental movement skills, you're going to see Gallahue and Osmond, and lots of work from Gallahue. So how do we shift the lens from the traditional sport-based lens, which is really in that manipulative category? When we think of fundamental movement skills, that's where a lot of the teaching and our phys ed programs focus on. And so how do we shift the flashlight, not necessarily away from that, but expand the flashlight to cover all 3 of those categories? And when we start shining the flashlight on the stability category, now we're bringing in the health lens. So if we look at what the definition of stability is postural control, maintaining balance, maintaining equilibrium. So those are the skills that we need to be able to teach. So my question is, number 1, can you do all of those? Who taught you how to do those? Where did you learn them? More than likely, you've never been taught any of those, or may perhaps stop, but you haven't really been taught those. The only time you will actually learn those is when you get injured and you're going to physio or chiro or some sort of rehab, and they're reteaching you how to perform those correctly. Same thing with locomotor. We just assume kids pick that up through natural play, and some of it they do. But there are correct techniques for each of those. So again, who taught you these and where did you learn those? And then the manipulatives are the ones that we spend a lot of our time in phys ed. So again, Dr. Gallahue, fundamental movement skills have utility throughout the entire lifespan. Important components of daily living for adults as well as children. The red ones that you see there are the ones that are represented in the program that I'm trying to develop here. So what I did for our schools in our province over this last couple of years is develop a common set of fundamental movement skills. Again, if I just go back to this last slide, many jurisdictions have generalist teachers trying to teach phys ed at the elementary level, and they've got a tough job. So they don't know what all of these skills are, and they will pick some, like there's no sequence for them to do that. There's no textbook. There's no textbook for teaching phys ed. So what I've done is said, okay, let's look, rather than trying to expose kids to all of those, we need to look at trying to gain some proficiency. So I looked at, okay, at a level 1 skill, in stabilizing, we should focus on balance and standing. And then locomotor, walk and run. And then in manipulative, rolling an object, an underhand throw or a toss, and kicking a stationary object. So at the level 1, the teachers should make sure that every student can do every one of those skills at level 1 proficiently. That's not to preclude that they can't expose kids to other fundamental movement skills, but it's their responsibility to make sure that all kids can do all of those 7 skills proficiently. And if they can't, they've got to be able to remediate. And then you can see level 2 and level 3 and level 4, they're all listed there. Now, a little piece on the levels. There are adults who can't kick a stationary object, who can't roll an object, who can't dribble, who can't catch, who can't kick. So it's not age specific or grade dependent. It's developmental. However, your scenario, you're not going to start with grade 7s and say, okay, today we're going to start with balance and stand. I'm going to teach you that, because you're going to bore the heck out of them. So I went with levels, level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these are kind of the suggested grade levels. So if I go back to this slide for you, level 1 would be kindergarten grade 1. So by the end of grade 1, the expectation would be that every single student would be able to perform those 7 fundamental movement skills proficiently. And then level 2 would be grade 2 and 3, level 3 would be grade 4 and 5, and then level 4 would be 6 and 7. And so imagine for us in BC, high school starts at grade 8. So my selling feature to the high school teachers was, imagine if in grade 8, every student came in and they were proficient at every one of those fundamental movement skills. What could you then do? And their eyes light up, and big smile on their face, and you can see they go, oh wow, we could do way more. And so that's the idea, is that moving away from exposure, we're trimming down what we want the teachers, the elementary teachers, to focus on and make sure all of those kids can do that. And then it's in a sequence as well. So the yes/no assessment. Can they do it? If it's yes, great. Basically, let them go. Leave them alone. If they can't, the teacher needs to remediate. Does it look right? Again, if it's yes, leave them alone. If it's no, the teacher needs to remediate and then try to explore with the student, okay, what looks right? If they can do it, but it doesn't look right, continue to explore what looks right to try to improve their efficiency in biomechanics. Again, this is predicated on the fact that most people can identify if a skill doesn't look right, but won't necessarily have the knowledge or skills to remediate. There's something called concept attainment, and that's an instructional strategy that was sort of postulated by Bruner back in 1973. So this is not a new instructional strategy. It's been around for obviously decades. It's an inductive model, and what you're trying to do is teach concept through the use of examples. It really has a lot to do with critical thinking. The students have to try to identify the key attributes or the characteristics of a skill. And how they do that is they compare and contrast yes examples to no examples. And they're going to try to identify the commonalities or the characteristics or the attributes of what comprises the yes examples, and then they contrast those with the no examples. Again, promotes a lot of critical thinking. So let me try this with you. What's the concept here? What are the defining attributes? I'm going to show you a series of, or a yes example and a no example. So here's the yes example. It's obviously going to be on fundamental movement skills. So you're not going to be able to glean a lot from that yes example until I show you the no example. So here's the no example. Now you're in your head, you're starting to think, okay, well, what's different? What are we trying to look at? So you're starting to develop a list of maybe characteristics or attributes. And now I'm going to give you another yes example. And again, each example now that I start to put up will start to test your theory of, or test your list or your definition of what's the concept that I'm trying to get across here. And some of you may have it already. So here's another one. That's a no example. And then here's a yes. And then a no. And another yes. If you got the answer, put it into Tozzle. And here's a no. And you start to see a pattern, hopefully. And I know I'm running through this very quickly. In the Tozzle, I do have some links to more detail around concept attainment. And here are all the examples. So the yes examples are trying to illustrate locomotion, movement. So running, jumping, climbing, crawling, hopping, leaping, and walking. And then the no examples are really examples of the stabilizing. So stretching, a balancing, a hip hinge, sitting, a twisting. The push-up is really a push, and then the chin-up is a pull. So it's locomotor, and then these are stabilizing. So let me try another one with you. Again, same idea. Again, this is a fundamental movement skill category. So there you have the first yes example. Again, you won't get much until you see the no example. And then here's another yes. And then a no. And you might start to think, okay, what's the category? What exactly are we looking at here? There's another one. Another one. Again, if you've got the answer, pop it into Tozzle. And what we've got, the yes examples are examples of sending. So you've got throwing, striking a golf ball, a cricket bat, lawn bowling, a punt, volley, which is a two-hand strike, and then an underhand toss. And then the no examples are of retaining an object. So the football player, the running back, is carrying. We've got a basketball dribble. We've got soccer dribble. We've got field hockey dribble. And we've got this kid stick handling on a balance board, which is If you've ever been on a balance board, it's very, very challenging. And then carrying a baby, a life skill. So if we look at galloping, so I'm going to get you to try a practical piece here now in terms of the observation. This is I'm just going to pop that off. This is a teacher that I just happened to Google and find on the internet. So I do not know this teacher. She doesn't know that I'm using her class for this, but I want you to watch, listen to the instructions. She's just got this class. She's brand new to teaching this class, and she's asking them to gallop. So I want you to observe, and very simply with the yes/no assessment, can they do it? Yes, great. And if does it look right? Yes or no. And I really want you just to try to pick out the no's if you can. That's what I want you to do.
Hey, Glenn.
Yep.
Could you turn down the volume on that a little bit? And also, we are just seeing a picture of your background of your beautiful dog, and not the video yet.
Right. Because I gotta go. Hang on. Screen share. Okay, so do it this way. Okay.
There we go. And if you go full screen with that, we should be able to see it. But you'll just want to try probably turning down the volume a little bit. It was pretty loud on that.
Okay. How's that?
Good.
So you're going to try to identify the kids who cannot gallop. Okay, so I know in terms of a camera angle, it wasn't the best view, but were you able to see how many kids could do it properly? So could they do it? And then if they could, how many it looked right? And so that's what we would try to do, is simply look at whether they can do it, and if they can't do it, then we need to intervene. So a lot of those kids, like, we don't know the background. We don't know if they were taught how to gallop. A lot of them were skipping. Some were just running. But very few of them were able to actually gallop. Okay, let me go back to presentation. So can they do it? How many were you able to see that they couldn't do it? And then how many didn't look right? I'm going to skip this brain break. It's called Squat Scalator. It's a buddy of mine from Ontario, Ted Tumertzoglu, does it. I was going to try to do rock, paper, scissors with you and show you on the camera, but that's not going to work. So I won't do that with you, but it's a fun one. You just do rock, paper, scissors, and then the winner gets to move into a squat position, and then you play again, and the winner gets to stay there. So we're trying to sell the message that the benefit of the exercise. We want the winner to have that. Okay, so if we're looking at implementation, how do we implement this simpler aspect of fundamental movement skill assessment? So really, this is research from, you can see the sources there. For me, this is, and I think for all of you, this is nothing new, and really it's Captain Obvious. We need quality instruction. We need to give quality feedback. There needs to be adequate skill practice opportunities. The activities need to be fulfilling. They need to be fun, and they have to be delivered from qualified people. Like, that's Captain Obvious. We know that. That's what SHAPE, that's what PEHE Canada, that's what everybody is lobbying for. What becomes a little more challenging is when we try to differentiate instruction. And so how we do that. Obviously, we try to do that through the content, through the process. Sometimes it's changing the products. Sometimes it's manipulating the learning environment. And when we are differentiating instruction, we are really being as inclusive as possible, because through differentiation, we're talking about every student being successful. And really, that's the key. How do we ensure that all students are able to achieve success? So specifically, what you want to do is to be able to baseline your class. And the simplest way to do that would be, even if we looked at that warm-up that teacher had, not the best warm-up that I would go with, where we just have the kids circling around. I'd have something more purposeful. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. But try to baseline your class using the yes-no piece of, can they do it, and does it look right? And so really, when you scan your class list, all you're looking at is checking off the kids who are no's. If it's a no for either of those two questions, then you need to remediate. So the assessment has to be very simple, has to be efficient, and it has to have maximal participation, so all kids are active. A great way to do your locomotor skills is through a dynamic warm-up. And so here's an example, which I call figure eights. And I'm going to take that off and try and show this one here. So sorry, you have to listen to this guy as well. Your kids come into the gym. Give them something. Quite a few of my secondary schools now have programmed their classes. When they come into the gym, they start a dynamic warm-up. And there are a bunch of varying kinds. I kind of really like this figure eight format because it's very specific and it really activates the brain. I really hate and I used to do this a lot when I was coaching as well as teaching, is, hey, kids, run around the gym for a couple times, and then when I'm ready, I'll call you in. Okay, it was kind of a filler time. So I want to maximize my time with the kids. So this one is called figure eight, and it's just simply a figure eight movement pattern. So I'm going in between the cones, okay, and I'm going around this way. And I'm going to suggest that if you want it easier on your brain to start with, beginner mode is use the cones. And if you want it more challenging, is to try to do the figure eight without the cones. So what you're trying to do is trying to carve two even circles or even snowmen, so to speak. Where did I learn this? From my physio, or from years of sprained ankles from playing volleyball. This is a great warm-up as you're doing the figure eight, because you work the medial and the lateral aspects of your body. You're working your ankles, knees, and hips in terms of lower body warm-up. It's gentle rather than sharp cuts, okay, etc. So the beauty of this, you can, as you go into this, I'm going to show you what I call gears. Just like a standard car, first gear is just nice and easy, very leisurely. Second gear, be about half your speed. And then third gear would be 3/4 speed, okay? And because we're doing this as a warm-up, we won't go fourth gear. I'm going to stop that there. So So that's the figure eights. And so you can use that framework to be able to deliver any of those locomotor patterns, any type of locomotor patterns that you want. And you can even add in lunges, also having it multi-directional, so forward, backwards, laterally. These are just some sample forms that you could use. I think your class list would be just fine to be able to do an initial screening. So that baseline of, can they do it? Does it look right? And so that's all this is. So this is in Tozzle if you want to download that. So that's the class or the teacher initial final form. And then there's one where I created for as a student. So the student, you actually put down the date and the specific fundamental movement skill that they were working on and whether they've got it or they don't have it. And you can do that as the initial and the final. So if we look at focusing on communicating student learning, again, as I was saying earlier, how do we focus on growth? And ideally, we want to be able to communicate that in the first reporting period. And then the second reporting period would be progress. So the difference between growth and progress is, growth is from the initial point, from your starting point to how far you've gone away from that, you've moved from that starting point. And progress is actually from the end line. So let's say you're going on a trip and you're driving to a specific location. Your progress is measured back from, okay, I'm 15 miles away from my desired endpoint, or I'm 25 miles. Okay, so usually our desired endpoint is some sort of end of the year outcomes or competency or standard. And then really where are the bulk of what we actually do report and communicate is really achievement. And that's just that snapshot of where the student is at that particular time. And it does nothing to help for remediation, because we don't have any remediation in phys ed. It's all in the other academic areas, but there's nothing in phys ed. If a student can't do something, a fundamental movement skill, we can't send them to a resource room. We can't send them to a resource teacher. We should be able to, but we can't. So how do we support that student? We label them, we identify them, and then they're left alone. So again, that YouTube that I used is listed here. So let's look at how we would actually do this with classes. So if I'm going to try to teach, or I'm going to try to assess stop, that's one of the skills in stabilizing. The early learning years, especially in the Ks, sometimes it can take you 3 to 4 months just to get the kids to learn, the Ks to learn how to stop. But generally, I would have them finding a spot on a line in the gym and then have them traveling on that line in some very simple locomotor pattern. And then I can change up the locomotor patterns as the kids get familiar with it. But I'm going to play go, stop with the kids. And when I have the students stop, I'm going to have them stop for 5 seconds. And during that 5 seconds is when I quickly scan 4 or 5 kids to see, were they able to do it? Did it look right? And if that batch of kids was good, again, send them off, go again, and I continue doing that until I go through my whole class list. And then, so you can progress from walking speed to, if you remember the gears, going from first gear to second gear to third gear. And again, changing your locomotor patterns. For intermediate and high school, I would use the figure 8 formation. So now they really have to concentrate. And if you've got space, where you're watching right now, you can try this figure 8 formation. And if you don't have 2 objects on the floor, trying to carve that figure 8, you really have to concentrate. So if you have the visuals, it's a lot easier. But again, the same principle, use multiple locomotor patterns. And again, play go, stop. Go, stop is all about reaction time. And then about balance, that's the stop.
Well, it looks like we lost Glenn for a minute. Sometimes technology does that. I'll see if we can get him back. And we have about 5 more minutes in our presentation today. So so if we can't get him back, then we'll have to roll with what Glenn has presented so far. And Glenn is very accessible on Twitter, though. And he's easy to access online, and he's more than willing to share resources. So I know he was telling me yesterday when we were practicing our hangout that he may have some tech issues because his internet had been cutting out on him. So my guess is that's what happened. I'm going to try to get him back right here. And also, Glenn will be, for those of you who are in the Pacific Northwest or are interested in traveling to conferences, Glenn will be presenting at the Oregon Shape Conference this October in Bend, Oregon. So he'll be attending that, and the dates on that are a 2-day conference, October 13th and 14th. So Glenn will be down in Oregon presenting on some of these same concepts as well. So I'm going to quickly send Glenn an email to see if we can get him back. And then if you have any questions at this point, please feel free to post them in the Tozzle, and we'll see if we can get those answered. Okay. In the meantime, if you do not have any questions, I'm also going to post a link to the Flipgrid in the Tozzle chat right now. Flipgrid is something new that we're trying this year with the FizEd Summit for reflection and sharing your thoughts. And it's a video type platform. And this is the first time that I'm going to be using it as well. So I've never used it. And everyone who participates in creating a Flipgrid, it's a short little video reflection on what you learned today. We are entering people into a drawing for 2 full-year premium subscriptions to Flipgrid that are being given away from Flipgrid. So they're helping us out here. So here's the link. There are also, we have Flipgrids for every session that we have done. So I'm starting to see some of those videos pop up. So please take a moment and complete a Flipgrid if you would like to be entered for a free premium subscription for the next year. Let's see. And we'll also have some information on the survey to get your certificate as well. So I have not heard from Glenn, so we'll give it a couple moments here. And my guess is, as he mentioned, he probably has some internet connectivity issues and it probably cut out on him. So we'll give it about 2 more minutes, and then we'll call it a session, and I'm sure Glenn will probably join in on the Tozzle to answer any questions that you have. I just saw your question, Rob, about Glenn's presentation. I believe he put it on there on the Tozzle, but I actually don't see it either. So what I will do is I will get in touch with Glenn and make sure he posts it on the Tozzle. So we'll upload it. So Rob. I'm assuming everyone can kind of hear me here on the session. I hope my mic's not still muted. That would be kind of funny. You've all been hanging in there if my microphone is muted. So it is 11:50, which is kind of the conclusion of our session. 50 minutes are each of our sessions, and so I think I'm probably going to end this broadcast here if Glenn doesn't jump in the next minute or so. If he does, I'm happy to extend and go overtime. I am running a marathon of moderation today. I've got 4 straight hours of moderation. So the next session that I'll be moderating here in about 10 minutes is a roundtable with Justin Schleider about reflection and through social media and physical education. So why I chose to do 4 sessions back to back to back to back, I have no idea. So I guess that was a foolish move on my part. So I am going to end this broadcast, so thank you to all the viewers who have come out and are participating in this year's Phys Ed Summit and who have joined this session on FMS Assessment Simplified. Lots of good learning in this session and takeaways, and I'm going to have to go back and watch it again as I begin my adventure of teaching elementary physical education for the first time this year from middle school. So again, thank you for joining, and I will have Glenn update his upload his presentation to the Tazzle. If you have any questions, post them in the Tazzle or get at Glenn on Twitter. He's very active on Twitter. At GlennYoung_PE is his username, I believe. And hopefully you will join us for more Phys Ed Summit sessions today. And again, thanks for joining. Happy learning, and I'll see you later.